This is People in Pedicabs with security experts. Hey Mark, how you doing? Hi everyone.
Great.
As you can tell, we're here in a pedicab at RSA. We just had a full day of RSA. I have had a lot of meetings, a few keynotes, but you've attended the show.
You've clearly also had a lot of free Starbucks coffee from our WatchGuard sponsorship.
A few other things too. I'm kidding. Yes, I'm feeling happy and awake. It's sunny here in San Francisco versus our Seattle. But let's talk about what you saw at RSA today. I guess we can start maybe a little with the theme of the keynote. We both got to see some of that, but what were your thoughts on some of the keynotes this morning?
Yeah, so the theme of the whole conference this year is the human element. So how humans interact with security. It started
both
off
good
with,
and bad, right?
Correct, yes. It started off with the president of RSA, whose name I cannot remember, talking about...
It's probably right here. I bet you some editor put it right there.
Basically, so my first takeaway from his talk was we all suck and we're going to get it replaced by AI here pretty soon. But then he kind of turned into there are ways that humans can still augment and be useful in a security that's being replaced by automation and AI, which is good.
I also think he is a little over-promising on replacement. Like, I think the state of AI, or let's be honest, does what we have today qualify as AI, or is it more machine learning? I think machine learning is at a level where it's really reducing the noise to the key things that a human has to deal with, and that lessens the amount of humans you might need on a team. But I still think you need a human to sort out the stuff that machine learning hasn't quite automated yet.
Yeah, and I did like that he talked about the need to also focus on your end users as well when it comes to security. He had a good analogy of a chef that basically brought a typhoid disease to this rich family by not washing their hands. Yeah. And he said you might make sure that your end users still wash their hands because they could infect your whole company.
Kind of ironic kind of metaphor considering some of the things going on in the real world, especially around conferences now.
That's a good segue into keynote number 2, I think, which was the CTO of McAfee, who his talk actually started out with talking about like the flu as a pandemic, and you can tell the bit they had to slice into it of, by the way, we're fully aware of this coronavirus thing that's going on now. But anyway, his talk was pretty interesting too.
Not yet pandemic.
They went with some, he talked about some security attacks that could be done against like Amazon compute environments with stealing credentials that you might not have known were there out of metadata. His was another good talk, I thought. The third talk that we saw in the keynote was a lady from
board member
Cisco.
Cisco.
And hers was really about democratizing security. So she had like 3 main bullet points: making security more simple, changing from a control to a collaboration model when it comes to security in your organization.
Talk a little.
And then the third one was one other thing that we'll stick down here. But yeah, like you said, I really like the focus on collaboration instead of control. So instead of saying you have to do this, blah, 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 work with people and say, all right, if you want to use your device, well, then you need to have these security protections on it, things like that.
Yeah, I chatted a little with Rich in another Pedicab interview our viewers might see, where we talked about, I really liked your point that usually security is here's what you can and can't do, and we're just enforcing these rules. And instead, she's getting you to adopt security because you want it and bring in all the departments. And one of the things she posed was, you know, rather than telling them how you think they should secure their business, asking them, what do you think the risk is? What do you think is the best way to secure this? And I thought that's fantastic.
I have a little bit of a contrarian opinion to 2 of her points. She brought up how, like a spoon, we learn to use it when we're an infant, and we don't need annual spoon awareness training, which is a funny little quip, but at the same time, I don't think security can be brought down to the simplicity of a spoon.
You're simplifying a complex subject a little too much.
You still can simplify it, just not to a spoon level. And then she also advocated for removing parental controls from children's devices and letting them make the decision. And personally, I'm not super comfortable with...
As a parent, I do think that if you as a parent do enough work early on, you can trust before trust but verify, and don't get draconian until you've verified that behavior.
As a grown man-child, though.
I don't know if I would. I didn't parent you, so maybe I would put the security controls on you.
Exactly.
So we should move on to other keynotes, but before we did, one of the nerdy things I think you and I both are into is encryption, cryptography. We talk a lot about SSL, TLS. Almost every year there's a cryptography panel. You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so this year was I think all 3 of the RSA members, and then also Whitman Diffie was there and a few other folks. And they really talked about a wide variety of topics. They started talking about
facial recognition,
AI and facial recognition, which I thought they made some good points.
Absolutely, I think ones we've talked about in our podcast.
Yeah, I think it was Diffie even that made the point that until we can, or no, Revast who made the point that right now we can still fool some AI, machine learning, like neural networks, stuff like that, by just changing pixels in an image. And until we solve that problem, we probably shouldn't trust it to drive our cars for us or make medical decisions. I thought they're advocating for bans until we can get good regulation for facial recognition made sense. And that there are still genuine concerns with it when it comes to how it's used.
What were the 3 things? I mean, they were talking about things like one is permanence. One of the differences is the fact that it's not just that someone is seeing your face, but that record of your face has permanence stored in some database.
The asymmetrical.
The asymmetric, which is you and me, we recognize each other's face, but you can look at me and know I'm seeing your face. We have no clue how many CCD cameras we're passing in this pedicab right now.
Yeah, probably quite a few. We're about to pass a target. So
and they're probably storing our face because they have you in some 3-letter agency database. So I'm now related to you. There goes my credit.
Exactly. No more underground for you. The panel was good. They also talked about AI facial recognition. They brought up a few other I'm trying to think of one of the other points that I really liked out of it.
Talked a little bit about blockchain and cryptocurrency.
Yeah, that was one of them where basically they were talking about securing voting with blockchain and how blockchain is completely inappropriate for voting, basically. My favorite quip from it was garbage in, garbage stored permanently, which is basically what blockchain is. It's just immutable storage.
It's immutable, but if you fill it with crap, have immutable crap.
So I thought that the panel overall was pretty good. My main takeaway was that Mr. Diffie was a very eccentric individual that I aspire to be when I'm his age.
I think that's what most security professionals are.
Exactly.
So tell me, I got to see some of those, but I'm interested. We like the keynotes, but sometimes it's kind of the cool little upcoming researcher talks that are interesting. What else did you see that I missed?
Yeah, so I went to a talk that was called Shodan 2.0. So for those that aren't familiar, Shodan is basically the search engine for the Internet of Things. It does more than just that. You can basically search for
It's a search engine for the internet, any device, any server.
Yeah,
you could find WatchGuard fireboxes on it. I mean, every single device is going to have headers in different places. So
basically it goes and crawls the internet of IP addresses and indexes headers and banners and everything from open ports and services. And attackers can use that as a form of reconnaissance to go find potential targets, for example. Like researchers use it often when something like Eternal Blue happens. They can go out and see how many potentially vulnerable hosts are there on the internet.
Yeah, because you look for an OS header that has a specific version.
Yep, exactly. But for this talk, they labeled it as Shodan 2.0. So I went to it assuming they're going to have this sweet new tool, but really it was more of an augmentation of the current tool, which was still interesting. So it was the head of security research at GE, they're one of their consulting divisions. And he recognized that there was a need in power distribution, energy distribution, utilities, things like that, for better security and better identification of potentially vulnerable systems because of all these major breaches that we've seen recently, like Ukraine having their power grid shut down. I guess he almost got shipped out there to go try and fix up the mess too at that point in time. The US a few years ago noted that people have been probing our power grid. Yeah. And so he petitioned the Department of Energy to get funding to basically do this project of augmenting Shodan to work specifically for the energy sector.
Gotcha.
They ended up getting funding. Funny enough, they almost lost their funding because of Mr. Robot.
Wow.
Right after they got their funding award.
One of my favorite shows, guys.
Mr. Robot featured an episode where Elliot, the main character, used Shodan to identify a target, and the
And by the way, I've used it to find Rockwell equipment as a web ICS web GUI interface. So it's trivial to do.
But the DOE basically said, "Why are we funding a hacking tool?" But anyways, they got the funding, and they ended up writing a bunch of new search parameters specifically tailored for industrial control systems and operational technology. They were able to add more protocol recognition now too, so you can identify potentially open services. It was all like pretty good stuff for ICS. They added tools and reports to make it easy for even low-skilled people to use it.
So parsing a little more protocols and maybe having a few canned search options that make it easier for people to find it.
Because they highlighted the cybersecurity skills gap too, and how it's a big issue in the energy sector.
That's cool. I'm not sure it counts as 2.0 level, but it's neat.
It was neat.
Yeah.
Next talk I went to was all about medical hacking, basically.
Yeah.
So it's billed as hacking IoT in medical, but it was actually much more than that. So he started out talking about just security in the medical field.
Yeah.
His research team had found quite a few flaws in like X-ray machines and anesthesia machines, and
we've talked to a few folks when we've gone to Black Hat about this, and I think in the past we've even talked to someone that works for the FDA and is trying to help medical field solve this problem.
Exactly. But then he talked about...
Is it the FDA or is it the...
FDA. Then they talked about research they did just in the dark web of like medical records for sale. He even went so far as to like contact one of the people trying to sell these bundles of medical records saying, is this real? I don't know if I believe you, this is real. And they set up a team viewer session where he's able to talk with this cyber criminal.
Oh, wow.
The cyber criminal pulled up his medical records, which even though like the bundle was billed as like New York state records and he wasn't from New York, because his insurance company worked with a company from New York, they were available. Talked about like what attackers could do with that. So they're worth a lot of money because you can do identity theft. You can sit there and slowly do claim fraud, basically, and do fake claim, like maybe you're going to your doctor's office and they pretend you're going to your doctor's office every couple months and just bill you $500 here and there to your insurance company and make money that way. Then they talked about specifically like diabetes, things revolving around that, like an app, like a diabetes treatment app or something, where he found that you had to install a bunch of adware in order for the app to even work. He found one that was sending off text messages to a premium SMS short code and charging you $200 a pop in the background. He talked about this little patch that replaces pricking your finger for testing your glucose levels. And it uses like NFC to communicate, wide open, no authentication. You can even dump the database.
Sounds like,
off of it.
If I were to summarize, you and I have talked a lot about IoT being a very rich attack surface because it's immature. Sounds like medical OT is pretty much the same thing.
Exactly. That was basically the bulk of the talk. And then the last one I went to was some really good research by another security company where they build it as debunking security myths. And so it was like a smorgasbord of like 6 different like things, like mobile security is too strong, I can't hack it. And they showed a severe vulnerability in mobile security. This was like gaining persistence on an iPhone, bypassing secure boot, which got him like a multi-million-dollar bug bounty.
Yeah, that's a big, definitely a big hack. I mean, the secured enclave, the secure boot process on phones, whether they be Apple or Android, is some serious stuff.
It was, so that one was part of, there's this database application called SQLite.
Yeah,
it's really popular. 1 trillion installs. It's used just about everywhere, like every app, everything.
Absolutely.
But it's also used to manage your contacts in iOS. And they found a code execution vulnerability where if you can get the application to load up a malicious database, you gain code execution on that system. So they used that to gain it on an iPhone. They did a really fun one where they had a tainted one where they loaded it up on stuck it on a honeypot, and they were able to compromise the command and control server. It was really interesting.
Sounds like cool stuff.
Yeah.
Well, cool. That's a great first day. I'm sure we'll talk more about it in our audio podcast. Thanks for being here, Mark.
Yeah, of course.